Big news for the travel and tourism industry. The federal government now easing testing requirements for travelers. So here's what's changing. If you are fully vaccinated, you no longer need that pre-arrival PCR test. You can instead opt for a cheaper rapid antigen test approved by the country you're coming from, taken 24 hours before your scheduled flight.
Fully vaxxed travelers may still be selected for random testing upon arrival, but will no longer have to quarantine while awaiting their test results. The changes take effect at the end of the month. For reaction, we want to bring in Manette Pasher, interim president of the Canadian Airports Council, and Dan Kelly, president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and Marty Firestone, president of Travel Secure Incorporated. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Marty, there is a lot to celebrate here. I know you've been watching this story for months now. You know, the country's Travel and Tourism Roundtable had recently sent an open letter to the PM calling for an end to these testing requirements. That is happening now. What's your reaction? What does this mean for the industry?
Extremely exciting. It's been a bit of doom and gloom over the last couple of years, so it's a pleasure today to at least have some good positive things to talk about. It's a step in the right direction, both on the level 3 travel advisory moving down to 2, and now the negative antigen test versus the PCR test. All positive news.
Okay, so let's talk about the difference there, Manette. There is a big difference between a PCR test and a rapid test requirement. So talk to us about how this will help travelers save some time and money.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the PCR test is more expensive. It can run from $150 to $300, and it can be more challenging to access in some countries. So eliminating that measure will make it easier for travelers. Now they'll just have to do a 24-hour antigen test, and they're more easily accessible. So I think there's a benefit there for sure.
Dan, according to the CFIB, 69% of small businesses support eliminating these travel restrictions. I mean, good news for the travel and tourism industry means good news for small business, right?
It sure does, not only for the small businesses in the travel and tourism business, of course, that is the vast majority of them, but also for all the associated businesses. And what I like most about this announcement with the switch to a rapid test is it would allow somebody in some of those border communities to decide perhaps the day before and come to Canada, get a test only a few hours before they arrive, and then still go to the local restaurants right away. They don't have to figure out a huge quarantine plan. This is a big substantive announcement, and good on Ottawa for finally getting there.
Okay, Marty, children under 12, not yet fully vaxxed, will no longer have to quarantine for 2 weeks. This is going to be a huge deal for families. How do you think this will impact March break travel?
It'll have a great impact on it. Many families were sitting on the fence at best, thinking that if they had to come back and the kids had to be quarantined, whether it be not going to daycare or school, and they couldn't go back to work, that was basically making up their mind not to travel. Now, with this happening today, assuming February 28th, moving on, they can go away knowing that when they come back, the kids can go right back into daycare or school. So it's going to have a tremendous positive effect on people booking March break.
And Marty, if we can stay with you for a moment, I want to also talk to you about that advisory against non-essential travel outside of Canada. That will be lifted, a big announcement coming from Ottawa there too. And that's important from an insurance perspective, right?
Very much so. There are policies out there by many insurers that the minute December 15th they announced a level 3 travel advisory, they pulled COVID off the emergency list, meaning you'd go away, but you wouldn't be covered for COVID. With the advent of this now going down to a level 2, COVID will be back in. So people who have individual health plans will not have any concern now. They will be fully covered for any unexpected medical emergency.
So, Dan, the U.S. and others have allowed travelers to use rapid tests. We have not done that so far. Some say tourists are choosing to avoid Canada because of those tight travel restrictions. So how has that impacted Canada's reputation when it comes to travel and tourism?
Well, look, I mean, not only has parts of Canada had the longest lockdowns in the world, we've had among the greatest restrictions in the world. It's great to see that we're finally figuring out that we're going to have to figure out ways to live with COVID and manage it rather than just try to prevent it at our borders nonstop. Our border policies weren't leading to any great outcomes either, and I think that's an important thing to realize. is that governments finally have started to listen to the science associated with some of these things. And as they've been lecturing us for many months, it's good that the government is actually acknowledging and acting on some of these changes.
And Minette, some have said the science says these travel restrictions could have been lifted much sooner. Has it been disappointing to see how long it's taken to get here?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, our industry has been through a lot these past 2 years, and really, quite frankly, every week matters. And we need to move forward. We need to get back in the air, and we really need a clear timeline on when the rest of the travel measures will be eliminated. You know, people are booking for the summer, and our tourism industry needs to know when this last pre-departure test will be eliminated as well. So encouraging news today, but I think, you know, steps forward, and we still have a bit to go as well.
And Minette, if we can stay with you for one moment here, people will still be subjected to randomized PCR testing when they arrive at airports in Canada. How are Canadian airports preparing for that ramped up level of testing?
It's actually going to be quite a bit less for our airports. So our airports have been lockstep with government, working hand in hand on surveillance testing since COVID started. It was increased for the Omicron wave, and now it's going to go back to pre-Omicron levels. So the arrivals testing will not be a barrier. This was tremendous news for that and for our airports in order to be able to move passengers easily through when they land in Canada and not be isolated. So that was a really big win today.
And Marty, any guess on when we might be at a point where we could lift the vaccine mandate altogether on travel here in Canada?
I think they're just going to monitor levels. And if everything keeps on going down the way it is, hopefully the next move will be the removal of the PCR test requirement. And then we can go ahead and travel as we always did. So I think it's, you know, watching and waiting, but definitely, as we said earlier, a step in the right direction tonight.
And Dan, we've been checking in with you for the last couple of months. And we've been sort of getting your perspective on things. You know, a lot is about to change in the country from a travel perspective, but also in the province, right? That vaccine mandate is about to be lifted. We're going to see fewer restrictions. Are you feeling optimistic about where we're headed?
I sure am. I mean, with yesterday's news from the Ontario government about lowering many of the COVID-related restrictions, vaccine passports and capacity restrictions, today's news on the travel restrictions, we're finally getting our feet under us once again. I really do believe, for the very first time that I've said this in 2 years, I feel like the recovery can begin. It's going to be a long road ahead, certainly not a rapid fix to small businesses that are deeply in debt and hanging on by their fingernails. But at least the recovery can start as some of these restrictions begin to lift. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen over the last couple of days from both the province and the federal government.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Monette Pasher, Dan Kelly, and Marty Firestone, thank you all for your time tonight. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.